Today's podcast is brought to you by Kentucky Farm Bureau Insurance. When it comes to home and auto insurance, it's important to have the right coverage from a company and an agent you can trust. Someone who will help you properly protect the people and things you love the most. So if the unexpected happens, you and your family can rest insured. To request a free quote, find your local KFB insurance agent at mykfbagent.com. Kentucky Farm Bureau, big on commitment. Welcome to Kentucky Farm Bureau News, the podcast. I'm Tim Thornberry, editor of the Kentucky Farm Bureau News magazine. Our guest today is our 2024 KFB Excellence in Ag Winner Bethany Mattingly. Bethany, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be on.
Now, I know some of our readers have already heard from you in our magazine, but we want to talk a little bit about your experience in the Excellence in Agriculture competition. And you came with us to San Antonio to participate at the national level. And then, I really would like to talk about your farming experience. And you've got a lot of experience in education and things like that. We can talk about all of that, but really, we don't want to leave out anything about the farm. And I'm looking forward to coming and visiting. So
Absolutely.
Anyway, without further ado, Bethany, I'm just going to let you take it from here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll just move forward from there.
Sure. I grew up on a family farm. We had bottle calves. That was one of my big projects growing up, was taking care of the bottle calves. But we also grew tobacco, and we had some row crops whenever I was younger. And then we moved more into beef production and hay as I got older. And then, joined through FFA in high school and really found my passion for agriculture education and advocacy work, which led me to be an ag teacher. I came to Seneca High School right out of college from EKU, and they were starting up. They had the program around since the 1980s or so, but they were trying to look for a way to, add more people to the program, add more students and more opportunities. Kristen Wright had been there for 1 year, and then they hired me on, and I was there for about 12 years. The majority of the Excellence in Ag application that I put in and my work with that basically told the story of what happened to transform Seneca's agriculture education program into the success it is today. So that was a great story to be a part of, and it was a great story to tell. And then it also included starting up my own farm, which, as you said, is a sheep farm, and I love it dearly. And I spend all my time on working on how I can improve the sheep farm, trying to figure out what's the best way to get things done. And I thoroughly enjoy that whenever I'm not working in agriculture or agriculture advocacy. That's where I'm spending most of my time.
Now, you also, you're not in the classroom anymore, if I have that correct. But
that's correct.
You are still in education with the Department of Agriculture. Is that right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'm the Director of Agriculture Education and Outreach for the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. I've been here a little over 6 months. Well, actually, we're at 7 months now. So I joined in about September. And one of the first things that I got to work on was our recent Agriculture Education Week for the state of Kentucky. So it has been thrilling to be a part of that. And I've just been floored by how many people within the agriculture industry have stepped up and said, hey, we support this. We want to be a part of this. So that has been an incredible thing to see. And it's been really a great experience working with Commissioner Shell to get the message across about agriculture education and the power that has for the future of the agriculture industry, not just for future people who are going to be in the agriculture industry as professionals, but all of us are consumers. So being able to be a part of Agriculture Education Week, help plan it out and make sure things ran, as smoothly as possible was really a joy of this job. And then I also work with Raising Hope, kind of more collaboratively. I get to work with Miss Kentucky, which I like to say is one of the most unique parts of my job, because she's our spokesperson for Kentucky agriculture and Kentucky Proud. So she has such a great job, and she's been wonderful to work with, and such a great advocate for agriculture across the state. And then I get to work with the PACE program, which is helping to preserve farmland, which is near and dear to my heart. Part of the reason I became an ag teacher. And then, of course, we have the mobile science activity centers, which are 3 mobile agriculture classrooms that travel the state to teach agriculture education through science lessons and hands-on labs and things. So I get quite a lot of different things that I get to work on. But one of the questions I was asked in the interview was, are you somebody who likes to do one thing and finish it and then move on to the next? And I said, no. If I was in the kitchen, I would not even be satisfied with like a 4-burner stove. I would prefer to have 8 burners and something going on every single burner, and then preferably like 2 ovens, because I like having multiple things happening all at once. And if you asked me to just cook one thing, it would probably burn. But if I had, an 8-course meal, it's going to come out really well. So that is kind of how I roll. And that's how I rolled as an ag teacher too. A lot of times I was teaching 6 different classes, so none of them repeated, but I loved that because it was new and different every single day, every single period. And that is one of the things that's just thrilling about being an ag teacher, but it's also thrilling in my new position. And I am thoroughly, thoroughly enjoying it. I feel very blessed to be here.
Gosh, when do you have time to farm?
In the in-between pieces.
Well, hey,
Yeah.
I got to send a message out to Commissioner Shell. Listen, Jonathan, she is working hard out there. My goodness. Look at all the different things she's doing. You guys have such a great staff there and work so well with us. It's just been a real blessing to have you and everybody else there connected with us and all that you do. And speaking of education, I think you've got a new program that we had Commissioner Shell and the Lieutenant Governor on several weeks ago to talk about an initiative they're working on. I'm sure you've had a little bit to do with that as well, haven't you?
Possibly. Which program are you talking about?
The elementary ag education in elementary
Yes.
schools. Sorry about that.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So I've worked hand in hand with Commissioner Shell on what that looks like for the Department of Agriculture. And then we've been collaborating with the Lieutenant Governor's office and the Department of Education to ensure, we've got a really solid base for growing this for the future, which is definitely important. If you're trying to make positive change, you don't want to build a foundation on sand. You need to build it on something that's going to be secure so you can build it every single year and it can continue to grow well beyond, any single person's idea. Hopefully 50 years from now, we'll still be going around having ag field trips and experiencing agriculture in the classroom through all different grade levels.
You mentioned the farm you grew up on. Sound like it was a very diversified operation. And that's something that if we got away from it in agriculture, we've gone back to it. A lot of farms have diversified. They've got a little bit of everything, sort of like the old days now, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And it's one of those things that I really think is, powerful for farmers, especially if you have a smaller farm. Having that ability to diversify really can be a strength, I think, for your farm. And it is one of those things that you never know what opportunities are going to pop up. And so if you're doing things that you're passionate about and that also support the farm, then when those opportunities arise, you can really go, all in and reap the benefits from that. So for example, one of the reasons I got into sheep was because we have so many people who are doing smaller farms where they just want to kind of homestead and provide for their family. And sheep are a really great way to do that because they help maintain the land, but then also can provide things like meat and milk and wool. And all kinds of things like that. But they're a little bit more manageable if you haven't worked with livestock before, compared to, a really big cow or a really big bull. That can be a little bit intimidating for people who have not worked in agriculture or worked with larger livestock. So, having that opportunity to work with homesteaders is something I enjoy about having my farm.
Speaking of your farm, can you, Give me a little history about that, anything that you want to share about how it came to be. And when did you first start thinking of, I want my own farm?
um, Possibly since birth. I've I've thoroughly enjoyed the farm. I used to go to school and talk about bottle feeding calves and going up to the loft in the barn and finding baby kittens. And then I was terrified to go back down the ladder because of scared of heights. But I made it down eventually. And so I've always loved working with the calves and the animals. There were parts of it I didn't necessarily always enjoy, but most of the stuff I just really, really thoroughly enjoyed. And whenever I went away to school at EKU and I lived in a dorm for a little while to finish up my degree, and I was just like, oh my gosh, there's just so much concrete. I need to see green. I need to be around green. And when you grow up in the middle of a farm and it's 100 plus acres or even larger than that, you don't realize how much you can just see and breathe because you can see all the trees and the sky and the clouds and the grass and the animals and everything. So there's just a calmness that comes from being outside, if you're me at least. And so from that point on, I was just like, okay, well, I really want my own farm. It would be great if I could do that. And then as I kind of progressed with my career in agriculture education as an ag teacher, I was looking for what can I do and manage while still being an ag teacher. And it took me about 4 years before I found the right spot. And I bought a little 6-acre farm and it had a barn. And it had a house. It wasn't a perfect situation. It had zero fencing. And I just thought, you know what, this is enough though that I could at least get something started. And if it ends up being just a handful of sheep or other animals, I would be okay with that. But once I got started, it's one of those things that you're like, oh my gosh, yes, this is exactly what I was missing. So before I could buy the farm, I would call up my dad and I would be like, Dad, I need some tractor time. Is there anything that needs bush hogged? Do you need me to move round bales? Is there anything I can do on the farm? And so I just realized, if it's something that I enjoyed that much, I really need to invest in it. And then, of course, COVID happened. It was the same time I was looking for a farm, and we had those COVID economic relief payments coming in, and I just thought, what am I going to do with this? I want to invest in something, and so I decided to invest in a farm, and that's when I bought my first farm, and then I bought my first small little flock of Gotland sheep that has now grown quite a lot. So I sold that farm in about 3 years ago. This is about my third year at the new farm. And I bought a 40-acre farm in Henry County. And the sheep grew quite a lot. I had about 18 on those 6 acres. And then now I'm closer to around 70 or so breeding ewes. And then, of course, I have some rams and some grow out lambs. So it's grown quite a lot. I'm very proud of it. Still have a lot of work to do, a lot of room to grow, but I'm excited with where I'm going in the future.
That is a lot of work. I know. I have seen it and talked to people that are in the sheep industry, and it doesn't take long to really get busy on the farm, especially a time when those lambs are coming along. So I don't know what time that is on your farm, but if it's near or you just passed, you've been really busy on the farm.
Yes, I had my first lambs hit the ground like the week before Ag Education Week.
Oh, great. Great
So
timing,
it was a
Bethany.
very busy time. I know. So, yeah, we were going to visit different schools, and the schools across the whole state, there was not a school we went to that did not have phenomenal students and educators doing great work in agriculture education. So, shout out to all those teachers and educators out there who did such phenomenal work and continue to do phenomenal work. But we had great time going across the whole state to learn about agriculture education. And then I'd get home and go straight to the barn and see, how many new lambs were around for me to help out that day. So it was a very busy week, but it was very, very enjoyable. And then I still have him, lambing right now. So I think we'll lamb through the end of April and be pretty close to finished, if not finished.
What do people say when they find out or you tell them that you've got a sheep farm and you do all this in addition? What's their reaction to that?
Oh gosh. Oh, there's a lot of how do you have time for that? um, but the sheep are, really pretty manageable if you have a good management system. And I know when things don't go well, it's because I somehow have messed up the management system. So maybe I should have rotated pastures and I didn't, or the current system I have doesn't work and it needs some adjusting. And so that was part of the farm last year, was working on getting those systems a little bit better, because that was my second year on the farm, and I on the new farm, and I needed to make sure that that was functional, because if not, then things fall apart and then problems happen. But if you have a management system that makes sense for you and your farm, then it becomes something that you can really experience the joy of working in production versus the frustrations. You're going to have frustrations no matter what, but if you can work on your management and make it realistic for what you have time for, it's not too bad. Most of the year is really not a problem, especially with the sheep, in my opinion. But around lambing time, it can get really, really busy. So if I know I've busy, time coming up on the farm, then I try to figure out a way to make that work. Or if I'm going to be out of town, I have really great farm sitters who are my former students, and they come out and I'll teach them, what it is I need them to do. And then they love being on the farm and getting that hands-on experience. So overall, it's worked out really well.
Do you
But there
find?
are definitely some times that are busy.
Sure. Have you found? I would assume that in your time in the classroom, there are a lot of students there that had no farming background. Maybe they had grown up in the city. What was that like to talk to students about that? Maybe bring some of these students out to your farm now that didn't necessarily grow up on a farm. And what was it like to sort of see the light come on as they got acclimated to it? Maybe, found something that they would want to do later in life.
Yeah. In 12 years of teaching at Seneca, I only had one student that came from a farm. So that is one of those things that there's two sides to that. And one of them is you don't know what you know until you meet somebody who doesn't know it. And so you have to kind of start off with the basics. And a lot of this is why we do the things that we do, in order to really explain to not just students, but also their parents, why it is that we do different things. So I remember one time Kristen had brought a baby lamb into the classroom because it needed bottles and stuff like that, which is a great part of their education, to give them more hands-on learning. And a parent had stopped by to pick up their student after school. And, it was just me and the parent, and the little lamb was kind of running around. And she said, I just hate how they do that to them. And I'm looking at the lamb going, this is a really happy lamb running around, having fun, being spunky. And she was seeing it through a different lens. And I couldn't even understand what she was talking about. So I just said, what do you mean? And she said, oh, those tags, they don't need those tags. Well, the tags she was talking about was like, the ID for the lamb that
Mm-hmm.
it had within the
Mm-hmm.
flock. And it was a scrapies tag, and it was unlawful to remove. And so I had an opportunity to talk to her about why those are important, to understand, and to track vaccinations and health records. And, one lamb we can watch and we can say, oh, that's our one lamb. But when you put it in with the flock, it's very difficult to count every single lamb and know individually that that white lamb is different than the next white lamb, which is different than the next white lamb. So having that, the tag, she thought was, I guess, some sort of decoration or like an earring, but really it's essential for health and management. So we had a lot of opportunities to talk and to teach not just students, but parents and other people about agriculture and why we do the things that we do. So there's a huge need for understanding more about agriculture because it impacts us every single day of our entire lives.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of that is that the students are jumping in to get that hands-on experience and to know and to understand. So if you teach in a more rural district, you might have more students who have hatched eggs or taken care of baby chicks and things like that, in their personal lives. Maybe grandma and grandpa or mom and dad have done that with them. But none of my students have held a chicken before, for the most part. There were a couple that had backyard chickens, but not many. So doing all these different things that, gives them those core agriculture memories, it really, really stuck with them. But one of the things that Kristen and I learned as we were working on developing and improving Seneca was that our students still would only stick with those careers in agriculture that they knew of, which would be like a farmer
Mm-hmm.
and a farmer and a
Mm-hmm.
farmer. And that's pretty much it. And so we started doing these tours, and we would call them industry tours. So I taught primarily the plant science pathway and environmental science pathway. So students would go into either of those pathways, and then in the fall they would have an industry trip, and in the spring we would have an industry trip, and we would go to 3 different spots in the fall and 3 different spots in the spring, and then we'd do it again the next fall and the next spring. So we would do that their sophomore, junior, and senior year. By the time they graduated, they had 18 different stops, agriculture pathway, or in environmental science or animal science if you were with Kristen.
Mm-hmm.
And that really opened up their doors to look at all these different places we can go. So we would go to like the insectarium, we would go to waterfront botanical gardens, we would visit hydroponic places, we would go to orchards, we would go to greenhouses. It was across the board to give them a real understanding of the opportunities within agriculture, which I think is really what we were trying to do, is just open up those doors. And I think working in agriculture education now at the state level, that's what we're still trying to do. And so whenever Commissioner Shell and I talked about different opportunities that we could do for Agriculture Education Week, one of the things he really wanted to do was make sure that students had an opportunity to get on a farm or in an agribusiness and experience it for themselves through the Real Ag Experience, which was one of our initiatives. And I fully supported that because I could see that change that happened with my students over time as they learned more and more about the industry that they really, really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One of my frequently asked questions whenever people hear that I taught in Louisville at Seneca is, well, do those city kids really actually go into agriculture as an industry professionally? And the answer is absolutely yes. And they really do across the board. Now, is every single one of them? No. But that's true for any ag program across the entire state or the nation.
Sure.
But a great example of that is we went to Bourbon County on one of our days to tour, and I walked into the school with everyone else, and lo and behold, one of my former students was there. And she was teaching a lesson on equine science, partnering with the Farm Bureau. So it's just one of those things that these students are actually going into agriculture, not just as educated consumers, but also within the profession, which is definitely something that we need across the board.
How cool is that? I tell you. Do you find that?
Super cool.
Yeah. Do you find that advocacy and education sort of go hand in hand?
Absolutely. That was something I did not expect teaching at Seneca, was that as our students learned more and more about agriculture and why we do the things we do, how it impacts all of our lives, they naturally became advocates. So we would go to different places, like we planted flowers for the Derby at Churchill Downs. We had mobile petting zoos that we would take all over the county. We did the pooper scoopers for the Kentucky Derby Festival, picking up after all the horse equine teams. We did all kinds of different things across the community to let people know that, Seneca is a great option to learn about agriculture, education, and how it connects to our lives. But one of the things that we did was, run into different people from all walks of life living in Louisville. And as we were doing those events, they would naturally ask questions of the students, like, how did you get involved with this? What is it that you like about this? Why do you choose to do that? And one of our band instructors at Seneca said, I just don't understand how you can get 50 kids willing to sign up to go scoop poop. And, we're trying to get a band together to just walk in the parade and play the band music, and I'm struggling to get that. How do you get these kids to do that? And the answer is that, they love working hands-on. They love doing stuff for the community. And they really love the opportunity to talk about the things that they love, and that includes agriculture. As soon as they understand what agriculture is about, they jump straight in. And I know that's true not just for urban kids, but suburban, rural, and everywhere in between, because it's something that connects with our lives so much.
Mm-hmm. One of the things we're talking a whole lot about a new generation coming into the agriculture world. One of the things we're talking about at Farm Bureau right now is a transition of farmland. We've seen an awful lot of farmland go away over the last several years, along with the number of farmers that are out there. So one of the things that we're trying to do is find resources and do some things to help people that want to go into farming, or farmers that have farms that they want to transition over to a newer generation to make that happen. Is a farm like yours, is that a good way to bring maybe a first generation farmer or a new farmer into the industry a little bit easier? And I would think that we have a lot of farmers out there that really want to see their farm stay that way. Don't you think?
Absolutely. I know that's something that's hit my family really hard. The family farm that I grew up on is now completely surrounded by subdivisions and interstate. So the opportunity to expand and to grow for my two sisters and myself and, our families is something that, is not as bright of an opportunity. There's only so much land. And, the urban growth continues to happen and continues to be a struggle for my family farm. So it's something that I'm very passionate about because I want to make sure that we have enough resources for generations to come. One of the programs I get to work with here at the department is the PACE program, which is Purchase of Agriculture conservation easements.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something where you can donate your land to the PACE program, and it will ensure that it is continued to be used in agriculture into perpetuity, as far as I understand it. And it's something I'm still learning the ins and outs of that program a little bit, but that is a great opportunity for farms who want to make sure that it's going to continue to be agriculture use that their farm is used for future generations. And I think one of the things that if you're trying to get into, a farm and get started farming, is patience is absolutely key. And like I said, it took me 4 years to find the right spot, and it was 6 acres. And if you're willing to put in some sweat equity, find those opportunities, then you can grow. Absolutely. One of the key things for me in expanding and getting my second farm was to work with the USDA and the Farm Service Agency in order to get that farm. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have been able to swing it, I guess you could say. And so those different opportunities are absolutely invaluable to young farmers or farmers who are looking to start out doing something brand new or expanding on what they currently have. The only reason I even knew about FSA and that the opportunities that were there was literally from being involved with young farmers with the Farm Bureau, going to the leadership workshop and the summer conferences and all of that. That is what helped me understand these are the opportunities if I'm trying to grow in this area. And that's how I ended up knocking on FSA's door and saying, hey, I really want to expand and do this. Is this an opportunity for me? And it ended up working out. And I know I'm not the only person that has that kind of story. So sometimes I feel like when we're in agriculture, we feel like we have to, come from a background that has a farm and continue it through the generations. And I hope people do, but sometimes that's not the story for every single person. So how do we get these people who want to be involved in production? And I think the connections that Farm Bureau is trying to do with connecting those people who are currently farming with people who want to farm and try to do that transition as seamlessly as possible and as easily as possible is one of the absolute most important things that we can do for agriculture across the whole moving forward. That's my two things: agriculture education and farmland preservation. If I could pick a soapbox topic, it would be either of those two for sure.
Well, I understand that completely. That's a big deal. I'm going to ask one more question, and I know the answer to it, but I want to hear your thoughts on it. How important is it? And I would even go so far as to say, how critical is it that we advocate, that we educate, that we ensure that there are farm acres out there for future generations? How important is that right now?
Oh, it is absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. What I used to tell my students was you can't go 5, seconds without being impacted by agriculture. Whether it's the chair you're sitting in, the pencil in your hand, the air you breathe, you are absolutely being impacted by agriculture constantly. So in order to make sure that we can continue, having the resources that we enjoy, having opportunities, having food on our tables, clothes on our backs, we're going to have to make sure that the land we have has dedicated use for agriculture, because that is a huge need that we're going to have for the rest of forever. There's nothing that we have anymore that you cannot tie to agriculture in some way. So if it's that big of part of our lives, then we need to be able to preserve it so that we can continue having those resources that we need. And I think the key to understanding and preserving those resources is agriculture education. And one of the things that you do if you're going through the Excellence in Ag application is you have to reflect on what it is that you've done and how you got to where it is you are today. And one of those things that, I knew I wanted to be an ag teacher, but what it really boiled down to was if you know it, you value it. And if you don't know it, you don't value it. And so as I saw urban sprawl kind of take over all the farmland that used to surround my family's farms, I kind of realized if you understood what these family farms are giving back to the community and to all of us in resources, that it wouldn't seem like such a small thing to develop it into another subdivision or another strip mall. Not that we don't need those things. Of course we need, buildings and shops and stores and resources and things like that. But we need to be smart about how we're developing the land, because at some point we're not going to have enough of it. And we're going to wish we had been a little bit smarter a few generations ago. So that really spurred me towards agriculture education. But it really goes back to farmland preservation and ensuring we have an understanding of the value of agriculture in our lives, which is really a full circle moment for everything that I do and everything I'm hoping to do in the future.
Bethany, it's been, as always, it's always so good to talk to you. There was something you said earlier that keeps coming back into my mind, and I know I'm going to use it somewhere, is about a certain kind of calmness there on the farm.
Yeah.
I think that says so much, and until you've lived it, till you've been there, it's hard to understand it. But once you do understand it, you get it, and you've got it, and it never goes away. And I just appreciate everything that you're doing out there, and so glad to have you here on the podcast today.
Thank you for the invite. I've had such a good time.
Well, folks, you've been listening to Kentucky Farm Bureau News, the podcast out there. I would encourage you, if you want to hear this and other Kentucky Farm Life podcasts, log on to your favorite podcasting platform.